welcome to Virtual Book Signing. I'm Daniel Weinberg, and as always, we're here at the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop in Chicago. It's a beautiful day, but you're watching us, and we appreciate that very much. As always, at Virtual Book Signing, you are virtually with us, and so we're happy to have you in the shop. If you're watching live, I hope you'll email in a question or three if you have them during our show, and we'll have our author immediately answer them for you. And if you're watching the archive and still wish to get a book that's signed, because we are trying to help you get a first edition signed library in your home, especially with all the wonderful books coming up during the sesquicentennial that's really upon us, then you can certainly order one. We'll have extra copies of first edition signed for you later on. So you're part of the show, so I hope that you will become part of the show. We're very happy today to have Mark Lause, who is a professor of American history at the University of Cincinnati. He's the author of Young America, Land, Labor, and the Republican Community, and also The Civil War's Last Campaign, James B. Weaver, the Greenback Labor Party, and the Politics of Race and Section. Today, we are going to speak about his latest book, Race and Radicalism in the Union Army. It's the University of Illinois Press, 186 pages with index and fine notes that really serve as a bibliography, and it's $45. As always, we're going to, I love the cover art, by the way. Is that new cover art?
No, that's from the State Historical Society site at Baxter Springs, Kansas.
Uh-huh.
So
I
the
really like
1864 Baxter Springs Massacre.
And is that on a wall?
It's on a wall.
Yeah, it looks big and wonderful.
We were wondering if it was a WPA mural.
Oh, that's a possibility. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, Mark Lause, what brought you to this book? Certainly something you call a challenge to whiteness.
It is, to some extent, and maybe perhaps a challenge to the idea of whiteness as a universally applicable way of understanding these things. Whiteness is talked about as a way of blacks and whites, the establishment of race relations there. If you throw Indians into the mix, you get an entirely different kind of a mix. We could think about, I'm a social historian primarily, specifically a labor historian, and I'm interested in using the Civil War as kind of a collider that physicists might use. It's wars or revolutions. You see societies come apart, and you can look at the pieces and see how they fit together. And that's something of what we have happen in this country in the 19th century in terms of race and radicalism, in terms of the long-term prospects of serious change in race relations. And that's, of course, remains of concern to us today.
Mm-hmm. So you've been working on race, radicalism, society. You certainly say in the book that the war is incomplete because we don't speak about society.
We don't, although they did at the time. And one of the interesting things when we look at the contemporary view of the Civil War, the views of the people who were sort of passing through it, they understood that these questions were being posed and they were attempting to address them. What we see after it's over is the winners of the argument, mm-hmm. or the winners of the non-argument triumph, and so we don't get a view beyond that. If, for example, we look at the question of race in 19th century America, we see this in terms of a universal culture of white supremacism. And yet, if you start looking at the actual conditions that people were living by, it's not that far from here. You have the site of the Art Institute, 1893, where the American Historical Association met there, and Frederick Jackson Turner delivered his wonderful frontier thesis, which was one of the great insights, really an insight that was so good the entire profession basically built itself on it. And you have the argument he makes there is that the entire of American civilization, the values, the culture, the institutions, so much of it is shaped by this experience of settlement. And that is so correct, so good an insight, that it is more correct than Turner actually realized. And as time has gone on, people have gone back to that and gotten new insights. For example, in the 1960s and 70s and since, people have looked at this experience of the frontier and the expansion of the line of white settlement is really establishing the standard in terms of racial divisions in American society, the stratification of American development by race. And the institutions that grow out of that are all going to reflect it. And that's certainly legitimate. But another way we can look at this is to realize that the entire line of white settlement is preceded by areas where race is unsettled. Ideas of race are unsettled, particularly in terms of the Indians and the native peoples. There are no ideas of race comparable to those that we're used to among the whites.
That's something I was going to